Far out on the edge of space, where few ships ever traveled, the human star cruiser Odyssey moved slowly through silence. Captain Elias Ward sat in the dim control room, watching the endless stars. His crew was quiet, used to the calm between patrols. But then something strange happened. A signal began to echo through the speakers, soft, broken, and old. It wasn't like any emergency call. It wasn't asking for help. It was whispering, almost like a child confessing to something awful. Ward turned up the volume. The girl's voice came through, weak and filled with pain. I failed. I'm sorry. I'm not worth saving. Please erase my name. Those words hit the crew like a punch. No coordinates, no clear message. Just sadness and guilt wrapped in static. Ward listened again. The voice wasn't crying, but it sounded like it could break at any second. His second-in-command looked at him, uncertain. It's coming from Velastra, the navigator said, checking the signal path. That name sent chills through everyone. On the bridge, Velastra had been a bright, beautiful world once. Tall crystal towers, a proud alien people, artists and scientists, but it was gone now, turned to ash by the Sindrith Empire. Nobody went near it, not after the Purge. Even pirates avoided the dead planet. The place was cursed, they said. Empire had made sure of that. But here was a voice, single voice, coming from the grave. Ward stood up slowly, didn't speak right away. The weight of the decision hung in the air. They all knew what going there meant. Radiation, danger, maybe even another Sindrith trap. But they also knew something else: humanity didn't turn away from pain, especially not pain that called out like this. Plot a course to Velastra, Ward said firmly. Now. No one questioned him. Engines roared to life as the Odyssey changed direction. The crew prepared for what they might find. Some were afraid, some were curious. None of them expected what lay ahead. As they drew closer to Velastra, they saw what the Empire had done. Cities reduced to shadowy ruins, skies dark with smoke, oceans dried to salt. The entire planet looked like it had been dragged through fire and left to die. But that voice still whispered, reaching across space. A voice too soft for War, too. Lost to be a trap. Ward couldn't explain why, but something deep inside him believed her. She wasn't bait. She was broken. And someone had to be the one to reach her before the silence swallowed her completely. Velastra looked like a nightmare made real. The human ship Odyssey entered its orbit slowly, shields humming as radiation levels spiked. Fires no longer burned, but the damage was everywhere. Elapsed towers. Streets cracked like dry skin, twisted metal half buried in black sand. The planet was quiet now, too quiet, like it had stopped breathing. Captain Elias Ward led the team down in armored suits, scanning for life. Nothing moved, no birds, no wind, just the crunch of boots on ash. Buildings stood like ghosts, hollow and broken. Most had caved in from heat or time, but one place showed signs of energy, faint and weak, a government vault buried deep beneath the capital. The scanners detected a pulse coming from below, so they followed it, step by careful step, down collapsed stairwells and dark tunnels lit only by their helmets. The deeper they went, the colder it got. When they finally reached the vault's core, they found a room sealed behind thick blast doors. Ward motioned to his engineer, who opened it slowly. Inside was silence, then movement. A small shape sat huddled in the far corner, arms around her knees, head bowed low. Her skin shimmered like glass under the dim lights, silver blue and cracked. In places, her hair looked like strands of starlight, tangled and dull. She looked up when the door opened, eyes wide and glowing faintly. Alien, yes, but not strange, not monstrous. Just young, just scared. She didn't run. She didn't speak. She just watched. Ward took off his helmet and stepped forward slowly, kneeling to her level. "My name is Elias," he said gently. "We're here to help you." Her lips parted, but no sound came at first. She swallowed, her voice barely more than a breath. "You shouldn't have come." The team stayed still. No weapons drawn, no sudden moves. Ward tilted his head. "Why not?" Her eyes filled. With tears because I'm the reason they're all gone? Her voice broke. I triggered it. I triggered the failsafe. I didn't mean to. I was just a child. But I said the code and everything ended. Her whole body shook like a leaf in a storm. I sent the message so no one would come. I didn't think anyone would come. Why would they come for me? Ward didn't flinch, didn't speak for a moment. Then he closed the distance and wrapped his arms around her. It wasn't just a rescue hug. It was a human hug. Real, warm, solid. He held her like she mattered. Her breath hitched in surprise. No one had touched her since the day everything ended. You're alive, Ward. Whispered. That means you're worth something. That means you're hope. She didn't answer, but something in her posture softened. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her hands, once clenched, slowly opened. And for the first time in years, Kelly, the last survivor of Valastralet herself, believed that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry the weight of a dead world alone. As the Odyssey left Valastra's orbit, silence hung over the crew like a storm waiting to break. Kelly sat quietly in the observation room, wrapped in a thermal blanket, staring out at the stars. Her eyes were still tired, but they no longer looked hollow. The crew moved carefully around her, unsure what to say. Elias Ward, standing at the command deck, watched the stars too, but his instincts were sharp and they screamed of danger. It came not long after. Lights flashed red.
Alarms
Echoed through the ship. Sindrith warships dropped out of hyperspace. Like fangs around a throat-sharp, angular vessels built for quick destruction. Without warning, beams of energy sliced toward the Odyssey. The ship rocked violently, shields flaring. Crew members rushed to battle stations. Fighters launched from the hangar. Ward didn't panic. He stared at the screens and made his calls with steady force. They were surrounded. The Sindrith had been watching Valastra, had waited for anyone foolish enough to search the ruins. And now, they wanted to make sure Kelly never left. Deep in the ship, Kelly heard the sirens. She stepped out of her room unsteady but alert. A passing officer tried to usher her back, but she refused. She found her way to the bridge, where Ward stood like a stone in the middle of chaos. He turned, surprised to see her. Should be in the safe room, he said. But Kelly shook her head. Her voice was quiet but strong. They're here for me, aren't they? Ward didn't answer. He didn't have to. Kelly stepped closer to the main screen and stared at the Sindrith ships. They're afraid of what I might say, she said softly. They're afraid the truth will spread. Ward looked at her, trying to understand. What truth? Hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. That they made me do it. I didn't want to destroy Valastra. I was just a child. But they trained me. They gave me the code. Told me I was the failsafe. Said if I didn't obey, they'd kill. My parents. I believed them. I said the words. And then, everything burned. The bridge went quiet. Her words hit harder than any explosion. The crew, already angry, now burned with something deeper fury. Not at her. At them. At the monsters who used a child as a weapon and then left her in the dark. Ward turned back to the screens. His voice rang like steel. They want her silenced, but we'll get her to safety. And then we'll make sure the galaxy hears every word. The crew moved into action again, now with purpose. Not just to survive, but to protect Kelly and the truth she carried. She stood beside Ward, her fear still real, but no longer in control. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from her past. She was facing it, surrounded by people who didn't see her as a mistake, but as someone worth fighting for. And above them all, the stars watched in silence, waiting. To see what came next? The Odyssey shook with each hit, its shields glowing hot from the Sindrith fire. Outside the windows, space flashed with color as human and Sindrith ships clashed like thunder and lightning. The Sindrith fleet was bigger and faster, their ships slicing through the dark like blades, but the humans didn't give up. They fought hard, each move sharp, each shot counted. Small human fighters darted between enemy cruisers, drawing fire away from the main ship. Inside, the crew worked like a single mind, shouting out power levels, shield status, enemy positions. Elias Ward stood firm at the center, giving orders, eyes locked on every screen. Sweat ran down his face, but his voice never shook. He had seen battles before, but this one was different. This one wasn't just about survival, it was about protecting the girl who might change everything. Kelly watched from behind him, gripping the railing. Her silver fingers trembled, but she didn't hide. She watched as ships exploded in the distance, as brave pilots gave their lives so she could live. Her chest felt heavy with guilt, but Ward looked back at her and gave a small nod, as if to say, "This is our choice." A ship next to them, the Valor, took a direct hit and split apart. Flames burst into space. The bridge grew quiet for a second. A name was called. No one answered. Kelly stepped closer to Ward and whispered, "Why do they fight like this?" For me, Ward didn't look away from the battle. "Because you matter," he said. "Not because of what you did, but because you're still here. Tried to break you and failed." Her eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them away. "I don't feel strong." "You don't have to feel it," Ward said. "You just have to keep going." Engines roared as the Odyssey angled downward, diving below the enemy ships and speeding toward open space. Ward gave the command for jump drive. A countdown began. But the Sindrith weren't giving up. Their flagships closed in, preparing one final barrage. The bridge lights flickered, hull cracking under pressure. Kelly felt her heart pound in her ears. But then, in a flash of light, the Odyssey jumped. Space bent around them, stretched into ribbons, and the ship vanished into hyperspace. Silence followed. The crew let out shaky breaths. Some cried, some cheered softly. Ward leaned against the control panel, eyes closed for a moment. Kelly stood frozen, watching him. He opened one eye and smiled at her, tired but proud. "Made it," he said. "We made it." She looked down at her hands, then up at him. "Then I won't run anymore. I'll speak. I'll tell them what they did." Ward nodded. "Good, let's make sure they hear you." Around them, space was calm again. But a storm had begun to rise, not from weapons, but from truth. And truth, once freed, could tear down empires. ChatGPT said, the Odyssey reached the neutral zone, a quiet sector not owned by any empire, where many refugees and peacekeepers gathered. The stars here were softer, and the air on the station they docked with felt less heavy. But Kelly couldn't relax. Her body healed slowly, but her mind still carried the weight of what she'd lived through. She sat with Captain Ward in a wide, glass-walled chamber filled with light and silence, preparing to speak to the council that waited beyond the doors. United Species Assembly had called an emergency meeting when news spread that a survivor from Valastra was alive and under human protection. Some didn't believe it. Others feared what it meant. As Kelly adjusted the simple robe they had given her, she looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. She still saw the little girl who had been forced to speak the code that ended a world. Her hands shook, and her voice caught in her throat before she could speak. "What if I mess up?" she asked quietly. Ward placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "The truth doesn't need to be perfect," he said. "It just needs to be heard." The chamber doors opened. They walked into a wide hall filled with beings from across the stars, humans, reptilian diplomats, feathered judges, and even 2 floating thought singers from the mist worlds. All eyes turned to Kelly. The silence was thick. One delegate asked coldly, "What proof do you bring?" "Anyone can claim to be a survivor." Kelly stepped forward alone. She reached into the folds of her robe and pulled out a crystal key half-melted, charred by fire. "This was my father's," she said. "He'd worked in the Valastra vault. Only he and my mother had access to the voice code. He gave it to me to keep it safe." A low murmur filled the chamber. The same delegate asked again, "Why would they trust a child with such power?" Kelly looked down, afraid her voice cracked. "'Cause they didn't think I'd ever have to use it. But when the Sindrith came, they tortured them. They told me if I didn't activate the failsafe, they'd make me watch them die. So I said the words." A hush swept the room. Her breath came fast, but she kept speaking. "How do you know what would happen? I thought it would lock the vault or shut down the city. I didn't know it would erase everything. I didn't kill Valastra. They did. They just used my voice." Ward stood beside her now. The Sindrith had been hiding. They wanted a clean story. A dead planet. No survivors. No witnesses. But Kelly is the witness. And we will not let her be silenced again. The assembly went silent for a long time. Then, one by one, delegates nodded. Some looked shaken, others angry. Nodded at the empire that used a child to commit a crime so massive it could no longer stay hidden. That day they voted to open a full investigation into the Sindrith's purge of Velastra. Kelly didn't smile. But she stood a little straighter, walked a little taller as they left the chamber. Her voice had been heard. The galaxy had listened, and a small crack had begun to form in the wall of lies the Sindrith built. Kelly stood at the center of the crowded room, lights from a dozen news drones shining on her face, but she didn't flinch. All around her, voices murmured and cameras hovered as delegates and reporters waited to hear more. Her heart beat like a drum in her chest, but her voice was steady as she repeated the truth: how the Sindrith had used her, how they had broken her family, how they had turned a child's voice into a weapon. Each word cut through the silence like a blade, and though her hands trembled slightly at her sides, she didn't stop. Captain Ward watched from a few steps away, ready to speak if needed, but he stayed quiet because he knew she didn't need saving now. She was saving herself. When she finished, the room didn't cheer. They didn't clap. They just stared at her, like something old had just cracked open and the light was pouring through for the first time. Then questions came, slow at first, then faster. Was there evidence? Had others been used like her? Would the Sindrith be punished? Kelly answered what she could, but she was still just one voice against a wall of power. And that wall was already reacting. Hours later, a cold message arrived from Sindrith's high command. They denied everything, called her a liar, claimed she was a puppet of human lies. The message dripped with threats. And that night, someone tried to silence her again. The lights in the neutral zone station flickered. The air turned still. Explosions rocked the lower decks. Ward's team rushed Kelly to a secure chamber, but they were too late to stop the strike. Sindrith agents in disguise had slipped through defenses and planted charges. Fires broke out, walls buckled. Ward grabbed Kelly by the hand and pulled her through the smoke, his voice calm but sharp, leading her to the evac pods around them. Guards fought off the attackers, and civilians screamed and scattered. One of the agents broke through and came straight for Kelly, blade raised. She froze, but Ward didn't. He stepped between them, catching the attacker's strike with his armored forearm, then knocking him down with one brutal hit. Blood on his sleeve, fire in his eyes. Ward turned and said, "Run." But Kelly didn't. Run. She grabbed his arm, pulled him with her. They moved as one through the chaos, ducking past debris and dodging blasts, until finally they reached the launch bay. There, waiting for them, was a small ship, old but fast.
Ow.
Ward shoved her inside, followed close behind, and they launched just as another blast tore through the station behind them. As the ship escaped into the stars, Kelly sat trembling in the co-pilot's chair. She looked at Ward, his face bruised, armor scorched, and asked, "Why do they hate me this much?" He met her eyes and said, "Because you're still standing." And as the stars rushed past them, Kelly realized something had changed. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't surviving alone. And the more they tried to silence her, the louder her voice became. The small ship flew through deep space, away from the burning station, guided only by stars and a hope that hadn't fully taken shape. Kelly sat beside Ward, her eyes fixed on the dark beyond the glass, heart heavy with questions. She didn't speak for a long time, just listened to the quiet hum of the engines and the soft beeps from the navigation panel. Every now and then she glanced at Ward's arm where the bandage was tight around the wound he got protecting her. He didn't complain, he just flew. After a while, Kelly broke the silence with a whisper, asking where they were going. Ward told her they were headed to a hidden relay, one of the old human listening posts no longer in use. There, they could send a wideband signal to every free channel in the galaxy, a message no empire could block. Kelly nodded slowly, the idea settling inside her, She would speak again, not to diplomats this time, but to the people. All of them. The poor, silenced, the scared. She would tell the truth where everyone could hear it. But the Sindrith knew what they were doing. They had already sent ships to chase them. A patrol found them near a gas cloud, forcing Ward to cut power and drift. They floated for hours in silence, hoping to slip past the enemy's eyes. Inside that stillness, Kelly thought of Velastra, of her mother's voice, her father's hand. As he passed her the crystal key, the warmth of her bed before everything vanished in fire. And yet, she was still here, alive. Hurt, but not broken. That thought gave her strength. When the patrol passed, Ward restarted the ship and pushed it. Hard. They reached the old relay station just before the Sindrith came again. It was dark and cold, its systems asleep for years. Kelly and Ward worked fast, restoring power and unlocking the signal array. She stood in front of the old camera, took a deep breath, and spoke, not like a victim, but like a survivor. Her voice was soft, but clear as she told the galaxy how the Sindrith forced her to destroy her own world, how they threatened her family, how they left her alone in the dark. She didn't cry out. She just told the truth, word by word, like building a bridge from her pain to someone else's heart. Ward stood beside her silently, letting her voice carry. The signal went out in waves, bouncing across relays, reaching planets, stations, mining colonies, even Sindrith citizens who had no idea what their leaders had done. Across the stars, people listened. Some wept. Some raged. Some finally understood. Damn. And even as Sindrith ships arrived and fired on the station, Kelly kept speaking. They barely escaped, their ship hit and sparking, but the message was out. They couldn't stop it now. Truth had taken root, and once it grows, no empire, no threat, no fear can kill it. Across the galaxy, Kelly's message spread like fire through dry grass. It reached tiny spaceports, hidden rebel camps, quiet village domes, and even the cold halls of Sindrith-controlled cities. People paused whatever they were doing when her voice played. Some listened in silence, some with tears, some with anger burning in their eyes. The story of a child used like a weapon by a cruel empire struck deep. Protests began on faraway planets where no one had ever dared speak against the Sindrith. Old leaders were questioned. Secret truths were pulled into the light. Soldiers who once fought for the Sindrith laid down their arms, saying they would not serve monsters who hurt children. And while chaos shook the empires, Kelly stayed on. The move with Ward. Their ship barely held together after the last escape, but it didn't matter now. The war they had started wasn't with guns, it was with truth. Ow. On one remote moon, Ward brought the ship down to rest. Kelly stood outside under a sky filled with stars and moons, the cool air brushing her face. She took long breaths, her body still healing, her mind still heavy, but her heart steady. Ward joined her, holding a small device. There. Calling it the Kelly Uprising, he said with a faint smile. Whole worlds are rising up. The Sindrith are scrambling. Shh. You lit the match. She turned to him with a quiet, tired look. I didn't want to be a symbol. I just didn't want to be silent anymore. And that's exactly why it matters, Ward said. You didn't ask to lead, you just told the truth. She looked down at the soft dirt beneath her feet, unsure how to feel. 1,000 people had died for her to survive. Others were dying now to fight for what she revealed. She didn't feel brave. She just felt responsible. That night, she sent one more message, not to the galaxy, but to the children still trapped. Still being used? Still afraid? She spoke to them in the soft voice her mother used to use. I know you're scared. I know they made you think you're alone, but you're not. I'm here. And one day when the fear fades, you'll speak too. And when you do, someone will listen. That message didn't go viral. It wasn't loud. But it reached a boy on a prison ship, a girl in a training dome, a child, forced to memorize numbers that could kill, and they remembered her voice. In time, those voices would rise too. For now, Kelly finally rested. Not because the danger was over, but because something bigger had begun. She had walked through fire and survived. She had been used, broken, forgotten, but now she was something more. Not just a survivor, not just a girl from a lost world. She was proof that even the smallest voice could shake the stars.